I had pulled watch. And for Thanksgiving, I mean, I didn't fucking care. I mean, it didn't matter to me. You know, I didn't have any family there or whatever, so I pulled watch and, ate and whatever. And it was the second or third week of it was December 1st. So here we are, like 3 weeks in. And again, all I'm doing this whole time is just the occasional work party and just PTing and just whatever. I mean, when I would drink beer, it would be to pass the fucking time because I just didn't have anything else to fucking do. And it was just fucking boring as shit. Over and over again. And December 1st, which was at that point my 6-month mark in the Marines. That's the weird part to think about. It was only 6 months. And I got promoted. I went from E1 to E2. I became a private first class. And it was, for me, it was really fucking cool. It was something I hadn't yet dealt with. So that experience was, at that moment, it was humbling because they could have held me back from promotion if they wanted to. Because in my opinion, my behavior up to that point wasn't very exemplary. I wasn't getting busted all the time or anything like that. But as far as I was concerned, showing up the way that I did, I wouldn't have promoted me. But I respect and appreciate the folks that were in charge that made the decision to go ahead and promote me. So thank you guys too. And then it was like barely 2 weeks after that I got word that I was going to be going into training, which was quite a coup at that point. Here are folks that had gotten in, and months had gone by, and they hadn't gotten their clearances done and going to training. And within less than a week of a lot of them getting word that they were going to training, I was getting in. So something had completely fucking changed where they were, the way they were processing things. And again, it was another example of just things were changing the way they were done. So you figure I was there barely a month, and my class was to start right after the first of the year. In other words, I got word I was going to be going into class, and then we had what they call Exodus, which is like, it's like college. It's winter break, and I had the option of taking leave and going home, which once again I fucking did. And because of a lot of the expenses that came along with moving into essentially a new place and whatever, and frankly, I was eating out a lot. I was going drinking quite a bit, and not even with the amount so much as the frequency, that money just went out the door, and you only get paid so often. And just so happened that by the time Christmas rolled around, I didn't have enough to fly home. So I ended up going to Navy Federal Credit Union, which I kept a bank. I still have an account with, technically. I don't use it. And I got a loan. And I got money to go home for Christmas and buy presents and spend time. And I did take a couple days, just a couple days, to recruit, just to extend my leave by, 3, 4, 5 days. So I kind of had little over 10 days in all gone. But I treated it a little bit differently this time. So I went home and saw my then girlfriend and saw Mike again, that you may remember from MCT and so forth. And obviously my folks, and it was a great time. And this was a whole other fucking ball of wax, because now I'm doing holidays with my family for the first time as a Marine. And it was fucking weird. It was so weird. On so many levels. Because I had always, prior to that, because just the Christmas prior, I was in the fucking depths, man. I drank way more than I was drinking at this point. So I was constantly in just kind of fuck everything, you know, kind of thing. And it was just, I was not in a good place. Here was a year later. Totally different person sitting in the room. And now I've got a girlfriend who we had more or less decided we were going to get married. Which, not a smart move. And the idea was that we were going to get married after I got out of this school on my way to my first duty station. That was the plan. And then, you know, during Christmas, we kind of talked about it a little bit. And, but Christmas went really well. And Dad and I had a lot of time to talk and really just enjoy one another's company, which we hadn't had a chance to do in a long time. And so I'm sitting in the recruiter's office. Well, literally 4 days after Christmas. So it was 29th of December. No, I take that back. I'm going to be honest and tell you that I don't know what day it was. 29th of December is a different day. But it was December. And it was after Christmas. This much I remember. And my girlfriend calls me and says, hold that thought. Rewind back, and there's a staff sergeant that he kind of ran the place down there. He was in charge of each platoon, or of my platoon, I should say, because he had different platoons. And when he approved my leave to go home, he said, explicitly to me, he said, don't come back married. He said that. I wish I'd listened to him. Because she calls me and says, I can't find anyone that will book our wedding and marry us on the day that we need to have this done, or within the date range we need to have this done, and I don't know what to do. And she was in hysterics, which didn't register me at the time as a red flag, but it should have. And me being the kind of man that I am, the woman I loved needed something. And I felt it was my job to provide. So I said, well, you want to get married today? Can we? Yeah. And that, for me, that was the end of it. You know, I was like, that's what we're going to do. And I got permission to go, and we did, and we got it done. Not a smart move. Not a smart move, Grindhead. But we did. And I went back a couple days later, a married man. And the staff sergeant, he was just like, I told you not to do that. Because now, I had the option of moving off base during training and living outside the barracks. Here's why that was appealing to me. And maybe in the back of my head, this was why I went ahead and got married. And I'm going to admit something I've never said out loud to anybody. I'm willing to bet in my brain that's where my head was on some level. I'm not saying I got married to her to do this, but I'm saying that it was one of the things where I said, you know, well, there's a benefit to doing it now, so let's do it now. It wasn't the only reason, but it was on the list, that's for fucking sure. Because living on base was not cool. And everything about it, I'm surrounded by, for the most part, children, in my opinion. Like barely teenage adults. They all have different priorities than I did. And I was just constantly bored and constantly looking for personal space, to be perfectly honest. And I was emotionally exhausted with having to always have my guard up around these kids. So, and I don't remember what the impetus was. I don't even remember the conversation that we had that possibly could have gotten me to say, why don't you move down here? I honestly don't. I really don't. But sure as shit, by March, February, March time frame, she had moved down there, and we got an apartment. She hated it, but I was off base. And I will tell you this much, class became a hell of a lot easier at that point. Because you drove on base, you got in your formation, you marched into class, did your classwork, you went fucking home. And because I lived off base, I didn't have to maintain a barracks room anymore, which was a pain in the ass. But not having to maintain a barracks room, I just kind of helped clean the duty hut. That was it. It was very easy. So, those of you that are watching this, if any of you are considering going in the service, if there is someone you are married to, or you are legitimately, and I stress that word, legitimately wanting to get married to someone, getting married before going to the service is not a bad deal. You make more money, and you have more opportunities as time goes on. But make sure it's for the right reasons. Otherwise, don't do it. The benefits I'm talking about, in the long run, were not worth it. So I'm not married anymore, am I? So, so the stress, I was trading the stress of being in the barracks for the stress of trying to please somebody else. And it did not work out well. This was the beginning of something that just became a theme for the next 2 years, which was her assertion that serving in the military, particularly the Marine Corps, was unnatural and something regular people, normal people, didn't do. She'd never been away from home, and very, very, very close to her family. I'll never take that away from her. It was always good that she was close to her family, but in this situation, it didn't work out well. So, a lot of stories I'm going to skip for various reasons, including the fact of her role in these stories, because it's no one's business but hers and mine. But I made a lot of friends while I was down there, and there are a lot of very, very good memories when I was down there. Among which was reacclimating myself to the PlayStation. Those of you that have seen my Tecmo's Deception 4 review will know that I said when I acquired a PS1, one of the first games I got my hands on was Deception. It was during that time, it was after I'd moved off base. A buddy of mine sent it to me. Or not sent it to me, he and his wife, who, and I'm not making this up, about, not kidding, fucking 7 years later, almost 8 years later, they got divorced. I had just gotten divorced for the second time, I might add. So their one marriage lasted as long as both of mine. And she and I ended up seeing each other for a short period of time. Weird fucking thing. But he and his wife each had a PlayStation. They only needed one. They gave me theirs. One of theirs. And I got a copy of the Spider-Man game for PlayStation, which at the time was mind-blowing. And I got back into playing games. Something else that the ex-wife didn't think normal people did, for whatever reason. So, but at this point, class was going along quite well. I am not going to go into detail what those classes are for what I hope are obvious reasons. I can't tell you. It was interesting, and you got to play some pretty cool toys. There were some aspects of the technology that you kind of tilt your head and go, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But you find out later with the work that you do that there's a reason I'm not showing you everything, because things change as time goes on. You need to know the basis of all of this stuff. You need to understand how it was done before so that when you get to something it's more automated, why that's important. And you figure by May, I had another birthday, and it was a good time and everything else. We had Easter, and again, we just try to live as normal life as we could. But we were just trying to get through. So you figure she got down there February, March time frame, and by then I had gotten on a really good regimen of doing PT and stuff, because I had a squad leader at that point, which told me something I continuously heard for the rest of my time in the service, which was, you have a lot of heart and you motivate me, and I want to help you any way I can. Which is shorthand for, I know being in the Marines isn't easy for you, but you don't seem to give a shit. You want to be here, and that's the kind of person that makes a good Marine. And that's my alarm saying my laundry should be done. So, the reason I bring this up is that during that time frame, from the time I moved off base to the end of training, this guy was in charge of my PT, and I could be off school for hours upon hours upon hours, but I would have to go back onto base around midnight to run with him and the other guys, because that was the only time everybody was available. And this was where I hurt my back. I hurt my ankle earlier, and then I hurt my back doing this. The ankle story I'm going to tell as a completely different thing, because I want to tell the whole saga of my ankle from start to finish. So we'll shelve that, and I'll make that a video later. That relates to other shit. So, what happened with my back? Well, we would do runs, and we did a lot of what they call Indian runs. An Indian run is where everyone runs in a straight line, right? You're running. Well, we got this line of people running, and the last person runs all the way to the front sprinting, and then it just kind of goes like that. It's like about a 10 to 20 second gap between each person to give you enough of a break. And we made it interesting. We did Indian runs with sandbags. Not just one sandbag. But two big fucking sandbags mushed together into about the size of a small heavy bag. It was wrapped in plastic and duct tape. And what we did was we only took one with us. And you would pass it back, twisting your trunk back, and the last person had to sprint with it to the front and pass it off. And that's why you had the break in between. Suffice it to say, it did not do well for my back to twist like that and run and everything else. And we did that quite a bit, and that eventually was the beginning of the end for my back. I still have back problems to this day. Other things have aggravated it since, not my weight not being the smallest factor by any stretch of the imagination, but it started that weakening, and I don't regret it. Not for a second, because I bonded with these guys. Some of which whom frankly thought very little of me up until they had to be in a platoon with me where we were PTing. And they saw what I was capable of when I was able to focus. Because the reason that I had been being an idiot and slacking off and drinking and everything else was because I was going under emotional stress I didn't know how to handle. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to be honest, I think the reason I had her move down had more to do with just not wanting to hear her complain about being apart one more day. She had worn me down to the point where I was going to pull me down. Within the context of me, in my opinion, legitimately loving her at the time. Because she had been through all of this with me. Like, she was someone who believed in me. She was the one, if you recall, had driven me to the recruiter's office. So, but now, where she had been the only form of support, she wasn't as supportive as she had been up to that point, and now my fellow Marines were picking up the slack without realizing it. I find that now to be infinitely interesting. I'll never forget it. And I feel awful that I do not remember the corporal's name. Another corporal, because by that time people have been through. This guy was, again, right up there with Sergeant Pozorski as far as being the kind of Marine that you expected. And there's another guy there, along the same lines as Pozorski, who had been through, had re-enlisted and chose this MOS. Right around this time, he had opted to, he was moving on. He was done with school. He was going to his first duty station in the 2621 field and was getting rid of stuff. And he came up to me and he gave me a pair of jungle boots. And he goes, "You need these." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Green jungles are hard to find now." Because they're jungle boots that had like the green on the side. He says, "They're not going to be in regs for long. But they are certainly a source of status. Meaning, cool guys have these. And you're a cool guy. I want you to have these." And to his credit, until those went out of regs, I wore those fucking boots a long time. So, like, a lot of this became, in the beginning, right? Remember how I was talking about feeling like there was all this drama and shit? Well, the drama was coming up to a really cool part in the story where now, instead of the buck being passed, now the mantle was being passed. And now I was starting to understand why people felt a certain degree of status, because they'd gone through hell together in a different sort. And when I finally graduated from this course, I still have all the paperwork and I have the picture and everything. From the time I got there in November to the time I left there in June, it seemed like it took forever, like everything else. But I couldn't escape the feeling that finally I could get started with what was supposed to be the real thing, because now I understood. Now I knew that all the preamble shit was finally fucking done. And I could actually go do my job as a Marine. And I was really excited. But not before we had to take 30 days of leave. 30 days of leave. My wife was insistent that we take as much time off as possible so she could get home. And even from the perspective of her emotional well-being of needing to be home, in retrospect, it would have been way smarter to take, 4 or 5 days and go home. And then go back, and then get settled, and then a couple months later, take leave, and do it on a more regular basis. And but I will tell you that 30 days of leave, my leave balance never recovered from. And I regret taking that time on every possible level for a lot of reasons. It was the leave between boot camp and MCT all over again, in as much as I got way too comfortable and way too complacent. And though I was better with the PT aspect, I didn't drink as much, I ate healthier and stuff like that, it's still, I lost a lot of momentum that I had to gain back. And that is where part 5 is going to start being a Marine. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to me ramble for combined almost an hour. Thanks for subscribing, and as always, keep on grinding. Cheers, guys.